Hi there. One of the hardest medical conditions to prove a case for is cerebral palsy. We have to figure out whether or not the cerebral palsy was caused by the birth injury or whether it was something else. Because not every cerebral palsy is due to malpractice. Sometimes cerebral palsy just happens and it's an adverse outcome due to a very reasonable technique that was used during labor and delivery. Sometimes cerebral palsy is caused early on in the pregnancy, and the doctors and the nurses just have no idea that it had already happened. So what we do as lawyers to prove that cerebral palsy was due to malpractice in a birth injury lawsuit is really, we take 4 steps. The first step that we take is we figure out whether there was an actual cause that could have caused the cerebral palsy to occur, like an incident. So for example, if we look at the strip of the fetal monitoring at the hospital, we have to determine whether or not there were any moments of oxygen deprivation that occurred that could have caused brain damage, which thus could have caused cerebral palsy. Or maybe there was an infection that started in the NICU and perhaps it wasn't treated correctly and that caused the brain damage to occur. Or maybe even the babies were born prematurely, causing periventricular leukomalacia, also known as PVL, which is an indicator and cause of cerebral palsy. So there has to be, in the first step, a cause, an incident, something happened. Then what we do is we build a timeline really, and we try to figure out what exactly happened throughout the entire labor and delivery. If we can pinpoint the moments of fetal distress, then we can figure out whether or not the cerebral palsy was caused by that distress, which caused the brain damage. Once we have that, then we have to figure out the timing of everything. Did the lack of oxygen at a certain point, for example, cause a cerebral palsy? Or was this a genetic thing that happened well early when the embryo had first been created? Or perhaps maybe the cord wrapped around the baby early on in the pregnancy and we had no idea throughout the entire time. So there's a timing element, which is the third step that we take in order to prove it. And then lastly, we have to figure out whether or not the malpractice was actually preventable. If this was an emergency, mom came in and she was rushed into the ER and baby was losing oxygen and the doctor said, let's do a C-section immediately, and lo and behold, baby ended up with brain damage and cerebral palsy, it's not necessarily the doctor's fault. There's not malpractice there. It's all a matter of whether or not the doctor or the nurses could have prevented this medical error from occurring had they acted like a reasonably prudent doctor or nurse. So these are 4 steps that we take to prove that the cerebral palsy was caused by a birth injury and not just something that was an emergency or something that was inevitable. It had to have been preventable in order for us to prove this case and make it a birth injury lawsuit. Regardless of the fact, if you're looking into a birth injury lawsuit due to a child who has cerebral palsy, you should absolutely call a birth injury lawyer and talk to him or her, because you got to know your rights and you got to know if you have a case here. My name is Adam Funk. I am a birth injury lawyer. I'd be happy to chat with you. You can email us, call us, you can text us, and we will schedule a call for you and I to discuss the facts of your case.